folks, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to tackle a topic that is a little bit tricky, but it's something that I get a lot of questions about, and I've been kind of dragging my feet in answering just because I want to be as sensitive as possible. But essentially it is the question of what to do, how to diagnose the problem when you feel like you're making work and for whatever reason there's a jet flying out your window. Anyway, what to do when you're making work and it isn't selling, getting attention, getting traction. I'm gonna close the window. Hang on one second. All right, that should be better. Anyway, how to figure out what the problem is when you are making work and for whatever reason you feel like it's not getting traction, whether that means getting sales or getting attention or getting likes or getting reblogs or whatever. So yeah, I'm just going to share some thoughts on that. So the first thing to ask yourself when trying to diagnose whether there is a challenge or a problem with your work is how long you have been making that work. So I can't tell you how many comments and questions and emails I get from people telling me that they're really struggling and that they've been making their work for a while but it's not getting traction or likes or whatever they're hoping for. And then I go and look at their portfolio and I scroll back and I see, okay, the first time they posted something was 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago. And I'm not trying to belittle that. 2 months can feel like a long time if you're working really hard on something and putting it out there and not getting much of a response. But to put it into perspective, it took me probably the better part of a year of putting stuff online very consistently, like every single day, putting new work online before I started getting any sort of a response or any sort of traction. And it was nearly a year before I had my first client. And that is with daily posting of new work. So if you're not posting new stuff every day and you've been working on, maybe posting stuff once or twice a week and you've been working for a few months, that's really not that long. So if you find yourself in this situation, if you're not getting the traction, whether it's getting clients or reblogs or comments or whatever you're hoping for, and it has been less than a year, that is the number one thing I would say to that is to just give it more time and to keep making more work. So related to that is how consistent you are in sharing your work. So if you're making a new piece every couple of weeks, and I'm not saying that would mean that you're working a lot, because maybe you have a style where you're doing like really large paintings or really super complex things that you are not going to finish in a day or not going to finish even in a couple of days. Maybe you only have enough material to share every couple of weeks. That is going to be a challenge. And there's a few different ways around that. You could share more of your process. You could share really gradual stuff, but I would encourage you as much as possible to be posting new content daily or certainly every couple of days. Even artists that create large scale paintings and certainly aren't finishing more than a couple paintings a month, the ones that are really successful on social media do share their process almost daily. So yeah, those two things kind of go hand in hand, the length of time that you have been working on it and how frequently you share your content on social media and in your portfolio, all that good stuff. So if you find that you've only been doing it for a little while and you're not sharing that consistently, those are two things. Just keep waiting, keep letting time go by, and keep sharing more as much as you can. So related to social media, another important question is whether you're on the right platforms. So as an artist, you want to be sure to have your work on platforms where our potential art directors and clients will see it. So if your goal is to actually get paid for making work. If your goal is to just get likes, then I guess that doesn't matter quite as much. But if your goal is to have people buy your work and pay you to make work, then you want to be sure to be on the platforms where those kind of users are actually looking at artwork. So Instagram is a great example. Tumblr has been a really good one for me. And Etsy, even though it's not social media, Etsy is also kind of an art platform. And I've had a lot of actually big clients come through Etsy. So art directors, I think, tend to look on Etsy if they're looking for somebody fresh or different, rather than just going through like looking on Behance or something. I think I've had maybe like 2 clients come from Behance, but for me, Etsy, Tumblr, Instagram have been by far the most important. And then of course, just having my own portfolio website. But figuring out and making sure that you've been sharing for long enough, that you're sharing consistently, and that you're sharing on the right platforms. Those are 3 really important questions to ask. And a 4th question, again, related to this, is what is your photography like? So this actually really can be a problem for some people. If you find that you've been making your work for a long time, you're on the right platforms, you're sharing consistently, but there's just nothing happening, whether it's likes or interaction or commissions. A good question to ask is what's the quality of your photography? So I can't tell you how many artists and illustrators create really nice work, but they just do not photograph it well. So number 1 tip, you don't have to have like a great camera. You do need to have like a decent smartphone camera, but even just your phone should be fine as long as you're photographing in natural light. So if you're making stuff and you're working late at night and you've got your desk lamp on, you're taking pictures that way and then posting those onto social, they're just not going to be very good pictures. So make sure you are photographing your work well, that it's clear and light and bright and in focus and you can see what it is. And that's also going to show, especially potential clients, that you're professional and that you're taking this seriously as a business and not just kind of throwing stuff out there. So pay attention to your photography. So the second to last question is, do you have a clear and distinct style? Now, this is something I've gotten a lot of questions about in the past in general, just in and of itself, is style and kind of direction as an artist and choosing a focus as an artist. And I've done a whole video on this topic. But basically, my opinion is that style and focus, that's something that emerges over time. So, you know, if you're pretty new at this, if you've been making work for a few months, even for a year, and you're trying to say, okay, like this is my style, this is my focus, I personally do not think it's something that you can force. I think that style emerges over time. So it's kind of related to the very first question of like, how long have you been making this? So if you are looking at your portfolio and evaluating your portfolio and you've been making work regularly with intention for 6 months, you may have a style that's starting to emerge, but it probably will change over time, and that's okay. But what you're looking for and hoping to see eventually is some kind of consistency. So for me, I feel like my style was fairly consistent the first year that I was really focusing and making work, and then it kind of shifted, and I had like a big shift towards more realism, and then that whole second year of making work for me had a lot of transition in it, and I was just kind of figuring out, I think, how much I wanted to get into realism and ultimately what the work would look like. And from the 3rd year up until today, I feel like my work is pretty consistent. Like there's a very consistent approach and a similar look between all of my pieces that have been created in the last few years. So yeah, so that is an important question to ask yourself, but it's also not something that I think you have a ton of control over aside from just continuing to make the work. So related to the first topic, if you haven't been making it that long, just keep making it and keep making it regularly, and style and consistency will emerge over time. And the last question, I almost put this one as the first question because it's the one that you all ask me the most, is how to tell if your work is good enough. And actually, would I look at it and tell you if it's good enough? And the reason I never do that is because it is really subjective, and there are so many different factors that go into it, whether it is the kind of work that you're making, the scale, the media, whether you're the medium, whether you're doing fine art or illustration or design, what kind of style you have, like whether you have more of a realistic style or an abstracted style or a characterized style. There's just so many elements to it. So I would say focusing much more on the other questions that we've asked, like how long you've been making it, how consistent you are in making work, whether you're doing work every day, not just sharing work every day, but actually making work every day. Those are the things that are much more important in terms of determining the consistency of your work and the quality of your work. Because, you know, one example here would be, I'm assuming that if you're watching my channel, you are somewhat of a fan of realism, because I mostly do realistic work. But I want to draw your attention to an artist who I really enjoy and really admire. Her name is Elizabeth Graber, and she's an illustrator who has been very successful and has an incredibly different style than mine. We focus on some of the same topics. She also does a lot of food illustration, but her work, as you can see, is much more stylized and not realistic. But at the same time, it has a very distinct, cohesive look. All of her stuff looks like it was made by the same person, and that's part of what makes it good. Other things for me that make it really good are her grasp on color. She has obviously spent a lot of time and intention working on understanding color and employing it well in her illustrations. But if you were to evaluate her by how realistic her work is, it's not very realistic at all. So that is just like a little slice of why this is such a complicated issue, and why I usually refuse to answer when you all ask me to tell you whether your work is good enough. So I just would redirect that back around to our first question of how long you've been making it for, and probably you're getting the sense that that is the most important thing in my mind, is the length of time and the amount of effort that you spend making your work. So if you're doing that, if you're making work every day and you're working hard on it, and you do it for long enough, you will become good enough. Whatever that is, however you're measuring it, you'll get to that point. It just takes time and consistency and dedication and hard work. So I hope this was a helpful video, and I hope those of you who have asked me to evaluate you or look at your portfolio, I hope that you have found some helpful things here, and that it makes sense why I don't usually respond to those requests. So that is about it for this video. I hope you all have found it helpful.